I suppose as Met fans, we need to start off with our own mini tragedy in what was an otherwise very good week, in that we got to watch 5.1 brilliant innings of Kodai Senga the other day, only for him to leave the game and then be pronounced out for the rest of the season with a calf strain.
When I think about it, now that you mention it, obviously the Mets, if you don't know, the Mets won 2 games against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium this week, one of them being a blowout, and they won all 4 games. So they came into the series against the Braves on a high. And so they win the first game in a tightly pitched game against the Braves, and they take the wild card lead from the Braves.
Right.
Or maybe that was the second game. Then they won the second game, and that's the one that Senga pitched.
But Senga went out in that game with an injury, and things have not felt...
Right. The moment that he fell to the ground, it seems like the Mets fell to the ground with him, all of them.
Now, obviously, it's only been a game or 2 since then, but
they lost them both.
They did lose them both. But, as bad as that was for the Mets and Senga after him being done for the year for one start, the Padres have to be feeling good after they got the first real full no-hitter of
No. So you're right that there was a no-hitter. So Dylan Cease threw one, but Joe Musgrove had thrown the first no-hitter in Padres history.
That wasn't the first no-hitter this year that was thrown.
No. There was a combined no-hitter.
Right. I was trying to remember. I think he was the first one to throw the full no-hitter.
I'm sorry, you're right.
This year.
Yeah. So, and he did that all with a 76-minute rain delay in the first inning, which really impresses me, right?
That he could pitch the first inning, come back, and then be fine after that. And he competed in an unbelievable 3-start run where he gave up only 2 hits over three games, basically 3 full starts.
3 starts, yeah.
And he still got 25 in that time period. Nobody's done that but him.
Right. Who put the stat out? The list of players that have 3 starts, 25 strikeouts, only 2 hits are allowed. Dylan Cease, 30 strikeouts, 2 hits. That's it. That's the list.
I think he's the only one.
So and the Mets, are lucky also that after they stumbled and lost the last 2 games of the series and split it with the Braves, they've got the Twins coming to town, and they won't have to face Bailey Ober,
who was brilliant today on Sunday, striking out 11 Tigers over 8 innings. And the Twins, they have to be feeling good. They've got Royce Lewis in the lineup right now, and as long as he's playing, he's unbelievable. It's just, will he stay healthy?
I'm going to go to the game at Citi Field on Wednesday and watch the Twins and the Mets, and then I'm actually flying to Minneapolis next week and going to watch the Twins play again, but for the first time in Target Field.
It'll be fun getting to see them
at Target Field.
Yeah, so getting to see them up there. You're going to the Sabre Conference.
Yes. So all the baseball folks that are interested in research and things of that nature, I will report on that after maybe we'll talk about that in one of the podcasts.
Yeah, give a little recap for everybody, because I'm sure people out there would want to know what goes on at one of these things. We hear about all the baseball stats, but what's it like for the people that come up with all of them?
I'm going to get a chance to meet some of the great old Twins. Rod Carew's going to be there. Troy Hawkins, famous Twin pitcher. Bert Blyleven's going to be there, another Hall of Famer. So I look forward to hopefully getting a chance to at least meet and greet those folks. This, being the trading deadline, we'll do a whole show on wrapping up the trading deadline.
Right. So we're not going to talk
too
much about the specific moves, and we might mention them here and there, but we're going to do our review more of what the impact of moves will have, or what we think they'll have when we get past the trading deadline on Tuesday coming up this week.
But some of the things that happened have impacted the trading deadline. I noticed that A's closer Mason Miller, who was oft mentioned as a guy that they were going to maybe move to a contender and all that, so he apparently got so frustrated with something that happened, I don't even know if it was in the game, that he punched a table with his non-pitching hand, and he broke his finger, and so now he's not pitching.
It was about lifting more while he was in rehab for his current injury, and he injured himself more. And it's interesting because we've seen some teams who are, really in it, like the Rays at this trading deadline, start selling very heavily. Or no, you have a team like the Athletics who are not in it by any, measurable, metric. And they're not selling Mason Miller. They're not selling Brent Rooker. They're not selling J.J. Bleday, who I think has got like 30 doubles this season. So it's interesting that, teams are having different, takes on this trading deadline. And we're really seeing how some of the injuries are affecting them, and then how some of the teams are using guys coming back to bolster their teams even further. The Brewers activating Devin Williams this week.
Finally, right?
Right. For them, that's got to be, that's like a mid-season pickup on all its own for them. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll take getting a great closer back, especially, with the Cardinals just managing to hang around there in the NL Central.
Yeah, well, today on Sunday, Goldschmidt hit a walk-off home run to lead the Cardinals to victory, and they had scuffled a little bit in the past few
They're,
games.
they're almost negative 50 run differential, but they're still second in the division with a winning record. But that winning record is shrinking bit by bit. They're only 3 games over 500 now, with the Pirates, still hot on their heels.
And I think that we'll talk about the Rays more on Thursday, but I think they know their negative run differential is so pronounced that I think that's why they said, you know what, now is the time. And it's funny because here on Sunday, like a lot of trades kind of happened in the past, 24 hours or so over the weekend.
And really, this is interesting for people listening to this on Monday. I'm sure you'll agree, and unless something happens between about 5:30 p.m. here on Sunday night when we release this tomorrow morning. But this trading deadline, outside of really 1 or 2 deals, both that happened, I think, with Tampa Bay Ray players involved, it's been a relatively standard trading deadline. A lot of guys moving around, but nobody.
We get big names mentioned, like Blake Snell had been mentioned, and you really couldn't even understand. Are the Giants really gonna, like the Rays, gonna say no? And they're not even over 500. The Giants. And Snell went out and struck out 15 on Saturday, and I wonder, does that make him more tradable or less tradable?
Well, certainly, if you're a second half team looking at a pitcher, Blake Snell is money in the second half. His entire career. It's really interesting. He's only, other than his rookie season in 2016, he's never had below a 4 ERA in the first half, except for 2 seasons. The 2 seasons he won the Cy Young. And every year in the second half, his ERA is at least a full run better than it is in the first half. So if you're some team going, okay, you know what, we'll eat Snell's contract for a year, you might end up getting yourself a really good pitcher in this second half.
And I think the thing about Snell that I think about, and I think most people do, is he struck out the 15 batters yesterday in 6 innings. So I'm not really good at math, but that's 18 outs. That means 15 of his 18 outs were by strikeout. And he's a guy, famously, who was pulled out of a game in a World Series. And
but
so
we don't blame him for that.
Well, I don't blame him, but I'm saying, is this guy ever going to – I don't think he's ever pitched a complete game in the major leagues. And in the playoffs, that doesn't necessarily, divide the two. I guess you would be happy with 6 quality innings.
If I had a guy
if
a guy 6 scoreless innings where he struck out 15, I'd say, yeah, sign me up for that 3 times a series in the playoffs.
And the Snell's on one of those, is on a short-term deal, which is the only reason why I think his name gets mentioned in trade talk. I also noticed, and a player that we used to have on our fantasy team, by the way, Giovanni Gallegos of the Cardinals. He was
really good for strikeouts.
He was DFA'd over the weekend, and he was as a closer, as we know, and so it saves salary. So some of the moves you're seeing teams do has to do with clearing space so they can go and make the deal that they haven't yet made, which is what we'll talk about more on Thursday.
Right, and I think so. Right now, I think what you're seeing drive teams is, as we were said, injuries and money, because you've just seen so many guys. Giancarlo Stanton being on the injured list for this long has definitely motivated the Yankees to make at least one move on this trading deadline, which they've completed so far, and they're still in the market for more players. They've been linked to a couple different closers that we might see them go after to try to bolster that bullpen.
And I still think that they're talking about Garrett Crochet, although that seems less likely now.
Teams, since he came out with that thing of being like, I'm not going into the bullpen, I'm finishing the year as a starter, teams don't seem quite as hot trading for him.
And I don't know if that's just a bad PR move on his part to do that, because you come across as being a bit selfish when you kind of take that tack, I think.
I think it depends.
Just a bit, though. I mean, he's trying to protect his livelihood. I get all that.
I think what he's looking at is he knows he's, a guy.
This is his payday.
Right, this is his payday. And him proving that he can pitch a full season is important. So he doesn't want to go get sent to some team and then get moved back to the bullpen because they're concerned about his arm.
Well,
and he'll get to keep starting while he's in Chicago.
I think he's got to be up against it now anyway.
Right.
And so that's what I'm thinking. If you're trading for this guy and you think he can't pitch a bunch of starts,
right?
And then depending on why you're trading for him now.
Right. I think Fedde is the guy that to me makes more sense to trade for, just because he can at least handle the workload of pitching.
Yes, yeah, and he's probably going to get moved. We'll find out.
I mean, if you don't move him as the White Sox, I don't understand. Like you signed him on a cheap deal, hoping that he would be able to turn around. He did it. Now you cash in for a bunch of prospects for the guy.
Yeah. The Astros, I didn't catch this until I read the report this morning. So I guess they were down 5-0 to the Dodgers yesterday, and they came all the way back.
Yep, and Bregman
Bregman hit the game-winning walk-off hit, and they beat the Dodgers 7-6 in their best win of the season. Of course, they go out today on Sunday, and they lost to the Dodgers. But the Astros are going to be real interesting because they've got Verlander and now Luis Garcia, who is... I almost forgot about him, right, because he had the Tommy John surgery.
Right.
He is now working his way back. I assume such that he's going to hopefully pitch for them again this season. He did a bullpen on Friday. So if you're throwing a bullpen, you're planning to come back.
Right, and Verlander going to throw off the mound, which means he might be starting a minor league rehab assignment soon. So, I mean, maybe you get Verlander back. And right now, with the way that the West is going, there's a good chance you're going to be, if he comes back in late August, early September, he'll probably get to make a couple meaningful starts for you.
Absolutely, as long he's just not going to pitch 80 innings. And the Mets are going to save $17 million because of that. The same way that by Senga getting hurt and not pitching again, he won't hit the innings limit that he would need, or not limit, innings total, so that he will not have an option, and the Mets will have his option for 2026.
And so if he stays healthy the next 2 seasons, getting Kodai Senga at $15 million a year is a heck of a bargain.
Yeah, well, staying healthy really seems a little weird to say
now
right
it's a little worrying.
And with Senga, they're saying, he's out for the regular season. I don't even know what that means. So are we to assume that he's going to get back to a point where he could work himself into being a serviceable pitcher in the playoffs, so that he'd done like rehab starts?
Or
I don't get it.
Or it might be the kind of thing where it's like, you know what, if they're going to make the playoffs, maybe he pushes his rehab to be done a little hard. I don't know. I just think if the guy's done pitching, he should be done pitching. Right? We shouldn't pitch anymore. And someday Mookie Betts is going to come back. As is, we all enjoyed him commentating at the All-Star game.
Yamamoto and Walker Buehler, and I guess I didn't realize how bad Walker Buehler had pitched when he did come back.
It was not good.
It was not good, and so he's basically searching for it, and the Dodgers are desperately hoping that he can, because as good a team as they are...
Otherwise, they're going to start having to be like, fan in seat 133 in Section D, come on down. You're
Loosen
today's
up.
Starting pitcher.
So Buehler has right hip inflammation, and he rehabbed to start on Friday, and he'll do one more before they talk about his next steps. And this is all important, as you said before, because we're all leading up to the trade deadline. So what happens? The Phillies have Ranger Suarez now on the IL. Okay, he's had a really good year. He's an important pitcher for them. They already have Walker on the IL, not that they really want to pitch him that much.
No, it's already past Chaiwan Walker effectiveness season.
But, for a team that I would have said there's no way the Phillies are going to trade for starting pitching.
Now they're looking like they're more in the market for some starting pitching.
15-day IL, okay, I don't know. It's lower back soreness. Man, I hate it when it's lower back.
Oh, that's a scary thing as a baseball team.
I think Evan Carter of the Rangers also is going to see another specialist, because he's not allowed to have baseball activities now because he's got a back. I mean, you've got a back. We lived through David Wright here in New York, that whole thing, and it just was never good. Right? Like once that happens, what these guys have to do to prepare to play in a Major League Baseball game when they've got back problems in particular is
right.
monumental.
I mean, they're happy. Josh Jung is going to be probably back soon. He's playing. He's gone through a couple of rehab starts, and they're going to determine whether or not they want him to go through another couple in AAA before bringing him back to the majors. So it's interesting to see that, the Rangers are a team that are, they're only 5 games back in the AL West, and only 6.5 back in the wild card, which one kind of tells you how bad the West is.
That's true. And Max Scherzer came back and threw a good game. So he's back, and we always talk about Jacob deGrom eventually coming to pitch. I feel like the Rangers are in a really weird spot. I would probably just stand pat if I were the Rangers, by the way, when it comes to the trading deadline.
The fact that you won the World Series, you've had a bunch of injuries this year, makes it way easier to stand pat at the trading deadline and go, okay, we had a bunch of guys get hurt. We'll try again next year. We're still prepared for a run next year.
Yeah, I guess, we're the World Series champions, we should go for it. I'm just not sure what they should do to go for it. I think I said this on the last podcast when we talked about them, they just need to play better.
Right, they just need to play better.
So, and the Red Sox, who are playing well, and they'll play tonight against the Yankees. They're looking for Tristan Casas to come back, and
they would really like to stop having to play Dom Smith.
Exactly, they've gotten as much mileage out of Dom as they could hope to get.
Right, you can't really expect any more than what he's given you already.
And Liam Hendricks is, he's coming off UCL surgery. He's had so many problems. I don't know I would count on anything from him.
It's the same way the Rangers can't count on a ton from Tyler Mahle, who's coming back from UCL repair. It's just like you hope that they're going to be good, but you just really don't know what they're going to be looking at. The same way, if you're the Angels, do you really need Mike Trout rushing back from a torn meniscus in his knee this season?
So that the Angels don't lose 90 games and they lose 87 or
Right,
something?
exactly.
I don't really understand.
I mean, I guess the problem I have is like, okay, what are you going to do next year with that team? But, they're at least acquiring some prospects at the deadline so far.
And as good as Carlos Correa has been, and you know how much I like this player, I'm not unhappy that he will not be likely playing in the series at Citi Field this week.
Yeah, that's a good thing for our Mets.
So he's still got plantar fasciitis, and he's trying to get himself ready to play. And if you remember back to the time when Correa was being signed by first the Giants, and then they reneged, and the Mets, and then they reneged, and there was talk about him being chronically injured, and I kind of think that has happened, maybe not to the degree that it looked like it might have at the time.
Not to the degree that the teams were worried about, but more than the Twins are happy for.
And boy, I like that player, but if I was, I would be really frustrated.
It would be really, I mean, I guess
That
it's
would
probably only less frustrating for the Twins because Royce O'Neal being injured, or
Royce
Royce Lewis being injured constantly, not the basketball player. Royce Lewis constantly being injured is probably equally, if not more frustrating, because he's just always electric when he's playing.
And I'm surprised by teams like the Cubs, who made a deal, as you said today, making you think that I guess they're trying to show they're still in it. They're still interested in trying to win the division, I guess, or a wild card. They seem pretty moribund.
They made a move to try and give themselves. They're not out of it. That's a very weak division in the Central, and they're a team that won the division. They won the division last year.
No, they did not.
Who won the division?
I think
the Brewers.
The Brewers did, yeah.
But the Cubs are competing for a wild card spot, mostly behind the strength of Justin Steele. So I guess they kind of look at it and go, hey, we're a young team with a lot of good players. Cody Bellinger is on his way back right now.
Yeah, he's got a fractured, finger, and so he could get some point back on this trip. But I think he wasn't that good in the first place. So the fact that they're pining for Cody Bellinger to come back,
it's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm buying that they're going to do anything there. And we saw the whole Yelich thing, so that looked like it was going to scuttle the Brewers' chances when that happened.
And they kind of have just kept on.
They go right by it.
They're just like up. I mean, it's they're down to a 5.5 game lead on the Cardinals. They're 5-5 in their last 10. They're starting not to be quite as good, but it might not really matter other than all the teams in their division are kind of okay.
Right.
So that's the kind of division where you're going to have to play tough series down the stretch against when the worst team in your division is 50-55 and it's the Reds, who people are thinking they've got a positive run differential and they're in last place. That's a young team that could cause a lot of problems for a team trying to limp their way to the finish line.
Ellie De La Cruz had 4 hits today and 4 hits and I think 5 stolen bases.
Wow.
So, I mean, he is going nuts on the bases and is going to win the stolen base ground going away at this point. And it made me think a little bit, and I'll just do a quick aside here. We were talking about, so who's the best shortstop in the National League? And we're completely biased here because Francisco Lindor plays for our team.
But shortstop is, both in the National League and in the American League, shortstop has turned into quite the power position right now.
Let's leave the American League alone
right
now.
Right, but if you're just looking at the National League, you've got Lindor, you've got Ellie De La Cruz, you've got
O'Neal Cruz, if you want to say.
I feel like that's a little, tough. If he's playing right now, Trey Turner has been playing that way.
He's been playing very well, and he was injured earlier. And Ha-Sung Kim is not having the year that he had last year.
Do you count Mookie Betts as a shortstop?
Well, because he's been injured enough this season, I wouldn't put him in that conversation, even though I would keep him in the MVP conversation. I don't know how I can do both of those things at the same time.
That doesn't feel fair.
But no, I don't. And so Lindor, and there was some talk this week on how Lindor is unappreciated or underappreciated as the Mets shortstop. And I think it was Xavier Scruggs on the leadoff spot with Steve Phillips who said, the guy gets paid $341 million for 10 seasons. You can't be underappreciated when you're getting $34 million a season.
That's a very good point.
And I think you're right about that.
And I do think that L.A. De La Cruz is working himself to that sort of payday with 55 steals already this season. He's on pace to just blow everybody out of the water.
Yeah, he's going to steal 80 bases, I think. With we're close to the 2/3 mark of the season, and I always kind of do that at 108 games. And a couple of teams might be right at that threshold right now. And so what you can do is, if you really want to be like me, is take half of the guy's stats and add that to his total to figure out what he might project out to get for the rest of the season. So if you've got 80 RBIs right now, you're going to get 120 RBIs, and there's a couple of guys that have a lot of RBIs that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, well, I mean, then the guy that's leading the league or lead MLB in RBIs is exactly who you expect, Aaron Judge.
Yeah, and Ohtani obviously is right in that conversation as well.
Ohtani's in fourth at 76.
Yeah, well, he's still on a pace to get close to 120 RBIs, and I think the loss of Betts in the lineup has definitely impacted his ability, because that's much more frightening with him being in it.
Shohei Ohtani's going to have a 30-30 season.
Yeah,
that's kind of wild to think about.
Yeah, and you wonder, does he have a chance to win the MVP, or is it because he's a DH now that we wouldn't give it to him because he's got to go back to pitching and doing all this stuff, and then we give him the MVP? So I don't know. I don't know who the obvious MVP in the National League is now that Betts has been injured for quite a while. Ohtani has been great, but he's a DH. Ozuna has been great, but he's a DH.
So I think it really depends on where the Mets finish, unfortunately.
Yeah, you thinking Lindor has a chance for MVP?
I think it depends on where they finish. Yeah,
I think they'd have to come back and challenge the Phillies for the division title, which I do not anticipate happening. So no, and the wild card races that you said were heating up when we started, and it's true, although there's starting to become some separation between the teams that,
Right. There's teams that look like they're kind of solidly locking themselves into, we're going to be a wild card. We just don't know which one yet. And then there's the teams that we're competing for either the second or maybe the third wild card spot.
And it's not just, having, the Nationals, I think I included on the fringe last week. They're 8 games under 500. They're not in the wild card.
Right. They're only 6.5 games back, but you have to suddenly expect them to start playing like a team that they've not been the entire season in order for them to get back into the playoffs. And now that might be what's ultimately, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, one of the teams in the Central has to figure it out and do okay.
Well, you can, except that sometimes the mojo isn't there, and I would even say that for the Cardinals, I'm just not sure that the mojo's there. Obviously, we joke about their negative run differential as much as we joke about the Reds' positive run differential. And by the way, the Cardinals are like 4 games ahead of the Reds.
But I think that the big struggle is going to be, you've got the Braves and the Mets who are basically tied, and the Padres and the Diamondbacks who are also right there at the same record. So you've got 4 teams in a dogfight for 3 positions already. So teams like the Cardinals
you
and
can
the
throw
Pirates,
the Cardinals in there, but once you get down now
to the Pirates,
you're going to get to a point where being like 5 games under,
you're out.
You're kind of like, no, you're like you said, just you've played 5 games under through over 100 games. All of a sudden, you're not going to go and be a 67
and you're going to have to be better. Then you're going to have to be so much better, because you don't have to just be 5 games better. You have to be like 15 games better the rest of the way.
And you start getting into those, okay, so if there's only 54 games left, 108 games, well, if we can go, let's see, 40 and, 14.
38 and 14 the rest of the way. Yeah, we'll be good.
Yeah. So I think we're getting to that point where the good play, which can happen, it does
But it
happen.
just gets hard to predict that to happen for teams.
There are teams, and we'll talk about that in our trading deadline thing, in terms of teams that actually did have this crazy record after the trading deadline that you didn't see coming.
And sort of were able to pull it back at the last minute.
So, and we've got some, interesting series coming up this week. I just wanted to mention a couple of them. And I was wrong when we talked off air earlier. The Yankees are playing a 3-game set against the Phillies.
They're playing starting tomorrow. The Yankees are playing the Phillies, which would be an interesting.
Who are you rooting for in that series?
A meteor. Then we got the Braves playing Milwaukee in another, big time series that's going on. The Astros and the Astros are finishing up against the Dodgers. I'm not sure who they're playing next.
Yeah, we said the Twins are going to play the Mets, and that's a good series between good two over 500 teams. I don't know what they call them, 2 good teams.
And you've got the Padres playing the Dodgers starting on Tuesday, which would be a big series in the NL West, because the Dodgers are on top, but the Padres have quietly climbed back into the race, where if the Dodgers stumble a little bit, it could get spooky for them.
I think that's a good point. I think it's almost like the Dodgers, if they swept the Padres, would that sort of put the boot heel down there and say, bye, guys, we're going away?
Right. And if you're the Kansas City Royals, you have to be thinking, you know who you're rooting for? You're like, we're sorry, Mets, about what we did to you in the World Series, but it would really help us if you could beat up on the Minnesota Twins while we play the White Sox.
Yeah, exactly. That's like a party to play the White. We're playing the White Sox!
Yeah. They're terrible.
So
they're 0-10 in their last 10.
I know. I just wish they were playing the Mets right now, and they're not. The Orioles and the Jays, and I guess the Jays are sellers now. I think they haven't made the big deals that we talked about, and we'll see if that happens between now and the end of the day on Tuesday. But the Orioles are entertaining the Jays on the heels of them sort of deciding that they're not going for it.
Well, the Orioles have decided they're going for
I don't.
it.
Right. I don't think the Blue Jays are going to have a fun time in Baltimore.
And just a funny little thing. So the Chicago White Sox have a negative 218 run differential this season. That is a bigger run differential than any of the other divisions have. Like, just the negative teams have.
If you
combined.
add all the teams together, right?
Then if you just add any other divisions teams together, like if you add the Nationals and the Marlins, they don't even come close.
You might want to circle tomorrow night if you get a chance. Skeens is going to pitch in Houston against the Astros, and it's such a good hitting team.
No. The Padres are playing the.
I'm sorry. You're right. My mistake. I'm not sure what I'm looking at here.
Wait. You might be right. I'm sorry. I might be.
No, I'm right. It is.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Skeens is going to pitch against Houston, and the Pirates, like you said, are hanging around. I think this could be also the series where if they don't get out of there,
this is make or break for them.
It's kind of, but that's something to watch because this guy's been amazing. I think Randy Johnson
said he's the best pitcher since him.
Well, I don't know if he said that. Actually, I was kidding when I said that.
Oh,
but he did talk about Skeens in glowing terms, going, he loves what he sees from this guy. And, obviously Skeens is tall. Randy Johnson is tall.
And he attacks hitters in the same way Randy Johnson attacks hitters.
Now, Skeens kills a seagull with one of his pitches. He'll be just like Randy Johnson. But I don't expect that's going to happen because they're not playing in Toronto anymore. So, I think the trading deadline is going to – there's still so much that has to happen, and there's so much that already has. But will there be any big, huge deals, do you think?
I hope so.